We're starting today with, well, one of the most maddening paradoxes in modern military history. It's this story where a huge disaster, one that really defined a generation, happened not because there wasn't a warning,
No, quite the opposite.
but because a perfect, timely, accurate warning was just fatally dismissed.
It really is the ultimate case study in institutional blindness, isn't it?
Yeah.
A moment where this revolutionary tech delivered exactly what it was supposed to.
An accurate, timely report, actionable.
Completely actionable. And yet the human system, the organization built around it, just failed. Utterly.
Precisely. We're talking about that radar blip, the one that should have saved Pearl Harbor. Our sources today really let us track this minute by minute right up to the attack.
The clock has literally just ticked past what they thought was the hour of safety. It's December 7th, 1941. The time is 7:02 a.m., local Hawaii time.
And the scene isn't down with the fleet yet. It's up high on this remote ridge, Opana Point. Two young American soldiers are there. Private Joseph Lockard, he's the more experienced one.
Right, the operator.
And Private George Elliott, he's the trainee. And they're looking at this radar screen, and it's showing something. Well, staggering.
Yeah, a single massive formation. The signature on the scope was bigger than anything either of them had ever seen before. Just enormous.
Huge.
They worked it out at least 50 planes, maybe more. They were 137 miles out and heading straight for Oahu, straight for the fleet.
So our mission in this deep dive isn't just to retell the story. We want to analyze the sources to really understand why it failed.
The organizational breakdown.
Yeah, why was that blip dismissed? Who exactly was involved in that chain of command, or maybe lack of command? And what were the brutal lessons learned from it?
Okay, let's start by putting ourselves there. Section 1, peacetime thinking meets revolutionary technology. We need that context.
You absolutely do. The sources paint this picture of Hawaii as, well, almost a paradise, strategically speaking. People in the mainland knew tensions with Japan were rising, sure.
Yeah, diplomats were talking.
But on the ground in Honolulu, there was this feeling of security, almost naive looking back.
And that security was rooted in some really outdated thinking, wasn't it? The commanders, the top brass, they felt the island was just too remote for a big air attack.
Right. They thought maybe submarines, maybe some sabotage.
Little stuff.
Yeah.
Limited threats. That core assumption that a large-scale air raid wasn't feasible, that's really the bedrock of the whole tragedy.
And that assumption shaped everything, like how the forces were arranged. If you see photos from that morning, the Pacific Fleet is lined up neatly, battleship row.
Very tidy, militarily convenient for peacetime, maybe, but disastrously vulnerable if someone actually attacked from the air.
And the airfields, too. Think about Wheeler Field, Hickam Field. The planes were parked wingtip to wingtip, packed together.
Which seems crazy, right? Why would you do that if you're thinking about defense? Makes them an easy target.
Exactly. But that's the key irony here from the sources. They weren't carked for defense against an air raid.
No, they were worried about sabotage.
Sabotage. Worried about spies, maybe local agents, sneaking onto the base and messing with individual planes, so they clustered them, made them easier to guard on the ground.
Defending against completely the wrong threat, protecting against the small internal risk while leaving themselves wide open to the massive external one.
At single decision, wingtip to wingtip, turned those airfields into just perfect targets.
A shooting gallery, basically.
Meanwhile, out on the edges, you have this new tech being deployed, radar, specifically the Army's SCR-270B unit at Opana Point. This was cutting-edge stuff.
It really was. A long-range search radar. It was basically a big truck with a huge antenna on it, designed to look way out over the ocean.
And that's key, right? Long-range search. It was designed to spot exactly what was coming. Large groups of planes, hundreds of miles away.
But here's the fascinating part, how the institution, the Army, treated this new tool.
It was there, yeah, but almost nobody high up really understood it, or frankly, took it seriously.
It was like an experiment, a novelty, maybe even a bit of a toy to some, not the core of the island's defense. Definitely not. And the guys operating it, Lockard and Elliott, they were young, enlisted men, privates. They didn't have any clout in the command structure.
And that institutional sort of skepticism or maybe just lack of understanding, you see it perfectly in the operational schedule.
Ah, yes, the schedule of complacency. It's almost unbelievable.
These radar units, these vital eyes, were only mandated to run from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Just 3 hours. Because the commanders thought that was the most likely time for an attack, their opinion dictated the operational reality.
So after 7 a.m., shut it down, lower the antenna, head back for breakfast.
The island literally went blind. just as the workday was starting. The whole system was built around, well, convenience and expectations, not actual round-the-clock readiness.
And yet, the detection happened at 7:02 a.m., just after they were supposed to shut down.
It's this incredible little twist of fate, isn't it? The sources highlight this. Lockard and Elliott were actually packing up, ready to go.
But the transport meant to pick them up, it was late.
Just a random, mundane logistical hiccup, a late truck.
And that delay is the only reason the U.S. got any advance warning at all. Because Lockard, the experienced one, decided, okay, truck's late, let's use the time.
Right, get in a few extra minutes of training for Elliott on the scope, since the equipment was still warm.
If that truck had been on time...
Power off, antenna down. The Japanese planes arrived completely unseen. Total surprise achieved without even this potential blip. That small decision to do a bit more training was huge.
Which brings us right to that critical moment, Section 2. The detection and the massive blip. 7:02 a.m.
The sources say Elliott, the trainee, actually saw it first. And the size of the return, the signal on the screen, it was immediately alarming, a solid, huge mass.
Not just a few planes. This was an air armada.
Lockard steps in immediately. He trusts his gear, trusts his eyes, more than the schedule that says they should be off air. Checks everything, confirms the unit's working perfectly.
And they start tracking, carefully, calculating.
Using the radar's capabilities, they pinpoint the position. 137 miles out, bearing, north, 3 degrees east. And it's moving fast, heading right for them, right for Pearl Harbor.
And the size. Lockard estimated, conservatively, at least 50 aircraft.
At least 50, which is already way, way bigger than any friendly flight they knew about or expected. In reality, of course, he was seeing the bulk of the first wave, 183 planes.
Even his estimate of 50 was unprecedented.
Yeah, and what we really need to emphasize for you, the listener, is the quality of this information. This wasn't some fuzzy ghost signal.
No, it was precise, accurate distance, precise bearing, confirmed movement towards Oahu, and a size estimate that screamed danger.
At 7:02 a.m., this information gave them 53 minutes. 53 minutes before the first bombs fell at 7:55 a.m.
That's an eternity in military terms. Time to scramble fighters.
Get pilots in the air, time to alert the ships, maybe start moving them, time to sound a general quarters alarm across the island.
It was, quite literally, the single most important air defense detection in American history up to that point, delivered by the newest tech, operated by guys doing their job perfectly.
An absolutely actionable warning, clear as day.
Which leads us into the agonizing part. Section 3, the fatal dismissal, the chain of errors.
Okay, so Lockard knows this is urgent. He has to report it. He gets on the phone to the information center at Fort Shafter.
The nerve center, the place designed specifically to handle this kind of information.
Except this is where the system failure bites immediately. The information center was practically deserted.
Because it was after 7 a.m., that schedule again. The professional plotting crew, the people trained to interpret these signals, put them on the map, understand the threat.
Clocked out, gone for breakfast. The room, the critical hub, was physically empty of trained personnel. Peacetime routine in action.
So the call from Opana Point comes in. Who picks up?
Private Joseph McDonald, a switchboard operator, and guess what? He was packing up too, just about to leave.
Unbelievable. So Lockard gives him the report. Large flight of planes coming in from the north, 3 degrees east, 137 miles out. Urgent. Specific.
McDonald relays this message, this potentially war-starting message, to the only officer still physically present in the center, Lieutenant Kermit Tyler.
And this is where it all converges, doesn't it? The inexperience, the lack of training, the systemic flaws.
Exactly. Tyler was a fighter pilot. He wasn't a radar expert, wasn't an intelligence officer. The sources are clear. This was only his second day on duty at the information center.
Second day, just observing, basically.
He had zero training in radar operations.
Yes.
Zero operational experience with this new system. And technically, very little authority there at that moment.
So you have this urgent, specific, highly unusual report coming from a junior source.
Delivered via an untrained switchboard operator.
To an untrained officer who has no framework, no procedure, no context for dealing with it.
It's almost a miracle the call even got through that far.
Tyler thinks for a moment. He asks a couple of questions. We know that from the inquiries later.
Yeah, basic ones. Nothing too probing.
And then he says it, the words that echo through history. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. It just hangs there, doesn't it? 4 words that sealed the fate of thousands.
It's the ultimate distillation of that institutional complacency we talked about. It sounds so casual, almost reassuring, but deadly.
It was. And the sources explain his reasoning, which is understandable in a tragic way. He had, earlier that morning, overheard some discussion about a flight of B-17 bombers.
The flying fortresses, right, expected in from the mainland.
Exactly. So when he hears large flight of planes, his brain latches onto the convenient, expected friendly explanation. Oh, must be those B-17s.
But hang on, let's look at the data again. Lockard reported at least 50 planes, way out at 137 miles.
Right.
Tyler was expecting, what, 12 B-17s?
12. A big difference.
And Lockard reported the direction is north, 3 degrees east. The B-17s were expected from the northeast.
Different direction, too. And why would they be 137 miles out at 7:02 a.m.? It didn't fit the expected arrival time or path.
So the size was wrong. The bearing was wrong. The distance and timing seemed off. Why didn't those clear contradictions from the radar, the new technology, make him pause? Make him question his assumption?
And that is the core failure right there.
Yeah.
Why didn't he question it? Because questioning it would mean admitting he didn't know. It would mean disrupting the routine.
I'd have had to wake up a senior officer.
Exactly. Call his superior on a Sunday morning, report something weird based on this newfangled radar nobody really trusted yet. The assumption, it's the B-17s, provided an easy out. It fit the peacetime expectation that anything big coming in must be American. Low effort, no fuss.
So the assumption, the comfortable explanation, just steamrolled the actual data.
The expected reality killed the inconvenient truth delivered by the machine.
Meanwhile, back up on Opana Point, Lockard and Elliott are just stuck. They know what they're seeing.
They got the truth right there on their screen. They have to obey the officer's order. Don't worry about it. What else can they do? They're privates.
But they didn't shut down the radar.
No, they didn't. They kept watching. They continued to track that massive blip as it got closer and closer, knowing they were probably the only two people on the entire island who understood the gravity of what was unfolding.
Can you imagine, for the next 37 minutes, they just watched it approach? The sources give us this chilling timeline.
Okay, so 7:02 a.m. is the first detection and dismissal. By 7:05 a.m., just 13 minutes later, that formation is only 92 miles out, closing fast.
Then 7:20 a.m., they're at 62 miles. The tension on that ridge must have been unbearable.
Absolutely. Then 7:25 a.m., now just 47 miles out. The fleet has maybe 30 minutes left, and these two guys know it. They're watching the clock tick down.
Every minute that passes is just confirmation. Their report was ignored. The system failed.
And then, at 7:39 a.m., the blip disappears from their screen.
Not because the planes turned away.
No. It vanished because they got too close. It's a technical limitation of that specific radar, the SCR-270. It was great for long-range detection, but it had a minimum range, a sort of blind spot close in, once the Japanese planes flew inside that radius.
Poof, gone from the screen.
Invisible to the radar, just as they were practically overhead, they tracked the disaster right up until the final moments.
16 minutes later, 7:55 a.m. The first bombs fall. The blip was gone, but the attack had arrived.
The warning wasn't just missed. It was received, dismissed, and then meticulously tracked by the operators until the very last second. They had front row seat to the consequence of that dismissal.
Okay, let's move into that consequence now. Section 4, the immediate impact of that ignored warning.
Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, he's leading the first wave. As he approaches, he looks down, and he sees exactly what Lockard and Elliott had warned about and what the U.S. command had dismissed. The entire Pacific Fleet.
Just laid out below him, battleship row.
No fighters scrambling to meet him, no anti-aircraft fire coming up from the ships to the shore, no alarm sounding, nothing.
Total, complete, absolute surprise.
And he radios the code word back to the carriers, the one that became infamous, Tora, 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 which meant tiger, tiger, tiger. Their signal that complete surprise had been achieved.
And then the attack begins, 7:55 a.m. That first wave torpedo planes, dive bombers, high-level bombers, they hit Battleship Row with devastating accuracy.
The sources really detail the horror of those first few minutes. Take the USS Arizona.
Oh, the Arizona.
It's hit by an armor-piercing bomb, converted from a naval shell. It slices through the deck near the forward turrets and detonates the forward magazine, the ship's main ammunition storage.
The explosion was unimaginable. It basically vaporized the front half of the ship, lifted out of the water, broke its back.
And 11,177 men died instantly, trapped inside. Nearly half the total casualties for the entire attack right there in one moment. Direct result of that surprise.
And the USS Oklahoma, hit by multiple torpedoes almost immediately.
Yeah, she capsized very quickly, just rolled over.
Trapping hundreds of men inside.
Hundreds. And the sources talk about this. For days afterwards, rescue crews working on the overturned hull could hear tapping. Men trapped inside, in air pockets, banging for help, slowly running out of air or drowning as the water rose inside. 429 sailors lost on the Oklahoma.
Just horrific. And meanwhile, on the airfields, those planes parked wingtip to wingtip.
Perfect targets. Sitting ducks. They were strafed and bombed, destroyed by the dozens before they could even attempt to take off. The island's air defenses were crippled on the ground.
The very defense posture designed to prevent sabotage made them incredibly vulnerable to air attack. The irony is just brutal.
It really is. The peacetime mindset focusing on the wrong threat led directly to the destruction of the air capability by the real threat.
And what about those B-17s, the ones Lieutenant Tyler thought the radar blip represented?
Yes. They arrived right in the middle of the attack. Unarmed, low on fuel after the long flight from California.
Flying into hell, basically.
Pretty much. They had Japanese Zeros attacking them, panicked American gunners firing at them. They scattered, trying to land anywhere they could. Some ended up on golf courses, emergency landings on damaged airfields. Just chaos.
The whole attack was relatively quick, wasn't it?
Very. The first wave hits at 7.55. The second wave comes in around 8.54 a.m. By 9.45 a.m., so less than 2 hours after it started, it was essentially over. The Japanese planes were heading home.
And the damage.
Staggering. 8 battleships sunk or heavily damaged. Cruisers, destroyers hit. Nearly 200 American aircraft destroyed, mostly on the ground.
And the human cost?
2,403 Americans killed. Over 1,100 wounded. A devastating blow delivered with shocking efficiency, all thanks to that element of surprise. A surprise that shouldn't have happened.
Which brings us to the aftermath, Section 5. Investigations, system failure, and the human toll. America was stunned, demanded answers.
Absolutely. And multiple investigations kicked off almost immediately. Naval boards, Army boards, eventually a full congressional inquiry. And that radar detection at Opana Point became a central piece of evidence.
Lockard, Elliott, Tyler, they all had to testify, explain what they saw, what was said, what was assumed.
And the narrative that emerged was consistent. Lockard and Elliott did their job perfectly. They saw it, calculated it, reported it. Tyler, the inexperienced officer on duty, dismissed it based on his flawed assumption about the B-17s.
So Tyler made a mistake, a huge one. But the inquiries and what we can see from the sources, they point to something much bigger. Right?
Yeah, much bigger. It wasn't just one lieutenant's error. That was almost the final domino. The real problem was systemic. Catastrophic systemic failure, really.
How so? What were the main failures the investigations highlighted?
Well, you can break it down. First, just inadequate integration of the technology. You have this powerful new radar, but only 5 mobile units for all of Oahu.
And running only 3 hours a day.
Exactly. On that ridiculous 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. schedule.
Yeah.
Dictated by budgets and peacetime thinking, not by actual defense needs. The tech was there, but it wasn't woven into the defense fabric.
Okay, so poor integration. What else?
Second, just a total lack of procedure. There was no clear standard operating procedure, no SOP for what to do if radar detected a huge unidentified flight like that.
So when Lockard called, there wasn't a checklist. A specific person Tyler was supposed to escalate to immediately.
Nope. The information center itself was designed to be effectively unmanned by trained plotters precisely when this happened. And there was no clear, mandatory chain of command for Lockard to bypass Tyler if he felt the warning was being ignored.
Wow. So no process.
And that leads to the third big failure, the institutional culture. That underlying assumption we keep coming back to, that a major air attack on Pearl Harbor was basically impossible.
Peacetime thinking. Complacency.
Yes. The entire defense posture, the planes parked together, the limited radar hours, the skeleton crew at the information center after 7 a.m., it was all built on the comfortable belief that the worst-case scenario just wouldn't happen.
The system valued the routine, making sure everyone got breakfast on time, more than it valued reacting to urgent, potentially life-saving information.
Viewed in that context, Tyler wasn't really the root cause, was he? He was more like a symptom of the disease system.
Right. A junior officer, totally untrained for that specific role, put in an impossible situation in an empty command center, armed only with a half-heard rumor about some B-17s.
He became the easy scapegoat for a failure that went all the way up the chain of command, rooted in years of complacency.
And what about Lockard and Elliott, the guys who saw it coming? How did this affect them?
Imagine living with that, knowing you had the information. The one piece of data that could have changed everything saved thousands of lives.
It must have been an incredible burden.
The sources suggest it weighed heavily on them. Lockard, interestingly, went on to become a radar instructor during the war, poured his energy into making sure others understood the tech and its importance.
Trying to prevent it from happening again?
You have to think so. But still, that knowledge, being right, being ignored, and seeing the horrific cost, that stays with you.
And Tyler. He was blamed, but did the military eventually recognize the systemic issues?
It was complex. He faced intense scrutiny, public blame. But the official inquiries did acknowledge the lack of training, the poor procedures, the context of his decision.
Did he continue to serve?
He did, actually, and with distinction. He served throughout World War II, earned commendations, rose in rank. But that label, the man who dismissed the Pearl Harbor warning, it never fully went away. A personal tragedy wrapped in a systemic failure.
Even the enemy leader, Fuchida, the pilot who led the attack, reflected on this later, didn't he?
Yes, Fuchida, who later converted to Christianity and became an advocate for peace, often spoke about it. He said the Americans made two critical errors that day.
The planes parked wingtip to wingtip.
And ignoring the radar warning, he recognized that radar, the SCR-270, was a technological advantage that should have compromised his mission entirely. He knew that if the Americans had just had better procedures, better integration, the outcome could have been vastly different.
That image of Lockard and Elliott just watching that blip get closer and closer, knowing they're powerless to convince anyone, it's just haunting.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the final section, Section 6. The legacy and the universal lesson learned from this.
Because the military had to change after this, right? Fundamentally, what were the big takeaways?
Oh, absolutely. 3 core lessons, really, that revolutionized defense strategy globally. First, obviously, radar became king.
No longer a novelty.
Not at all. It went from being this experimental sideline to being the absolute foundation of air defense. Proper 24/7 operation, clear procedures, tight integration with fighter command, mandatory training. These became non-negotiable standards everywhere.
And we know how crucial radar was later in the war. Battle of Britain, Battle of the Atlantic.
Saved countless Allied lives and ships. But the catalyst for that universal adoption and seriousness was the disaster of Pearl Harbor, a lesson learned in blood.
Okay, so radar priority. What's the second lesson?
Early warning systems in general were revolutionized. The mindset shifted completely. Never again, the military vowed, would a major unexplained contact be dismissed based on assumption or convenience.
Every blip matters.
Every blip gets investigated, period. That dismissive, peacetime attitude was purged. Urgency became the default.
And the third lesson?
Peacetime readiness. The idea that you can relax standards or cut corners when you're not actively fighting, that died on December 7th.
Constant vigilance.
Constant vigilance, continuous training, rigorous testing of procedures, always assuming the worst-case scenario could happen today. That became the new doctrine.
So the story of Opana Point of Lockard and Elliott and Tyler, it's taught in military schools worldwide now.
Absolutely. It's the perfect tragic case study of how assumptions kill, how bureaucracy can stifle vital information, and how systems break down when communication fails between the front line and the command structure.
But let's bring this out of the military context for a moment, because this isn't just a military lesson, is it? It applies everywhere. Business, organizations, even personal life.
Completely. The deeper lesson here is about how organizations, how we process information, especially inconvenient information. When someone, maybe a junior person, maybe a frontline worker, maybe just a new data stream like that radar, reports something important, something anomalous.
You have to listen. You have to fight the urge to dismiss it just because it doesn't fit your expectations, or because it's inconvenient, or because the source isn't perceived as important.
Lockard and Elliott were the equivalent of today's junior analyst, or the engineer seeing a weird reading, or the customer service rep flagging a recurring complaint. They had the ground truth.
But they were dismissed because they were privates using tech the lieutenant didn't understand, and their report came at an inconvenient time, disrupting the routine.
The failure wasn't in the technology. The radar worked perfectly. The failure was in the human interface, in the system that prioritized hierarchy and routine over urgent, factual data.
We have to ask ourselves, what systems do we build, maybe unconsciously, that do the same thing, that filter out uncomfortable truths?
The whole catastrophe wasn't because of a lack of warning. It was a failure to connect the dots. A failure to adapt procedures to match the capability of the new technology.
It just must have been maddening for Lockard and Elliott. Knowing they did everything right, they tracked that blip all the way in, and the response was just, don't worry about it.
That blip, the most important radar detection in American history up to that point, ignored.
And the world changed forever because of it. When you visit Pearl Harbor today, The USS Arizona Memorial. It's not about blame anymore, is it?
No, it's about remembrance. But it's also a permanent injunction. Remember this. Learn from it. Don't let it happen again.
The warning was there. The willingness to hear it, the procedure to act on it, that's what was missing.
Which leaves us with that final thought for you, the listener, to take away and maybe reflect on. We talked about that 7 a.m. shutdown time for the radar, that moment where the system deliberately chose blindness because of routine.
So the question is, what's the equivalent of that 7 a.m. shutdown in your world, in your organization, your team, maybe even your own thinking?
What critical warnings, what inconvenient data might you be dismissing right now because it doesn't fit, because it's disruptive, because it comes from an unexpected source?
Sometimes the most important voice is the one telling you exactly what you don't want to hear.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a warning that was heard, but tragically not heeded.
We'll see you next time.